Hello, everybody. Hello, it's so great to see you. What seemed like we've been talking about for months. It seemed like it would never get here, right? Here we are, the start of the mystery quilt. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Today we are doing clue 1 of the Medallion mystery quilt. Are you excited? I am. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you. Come on in and get situated. And while everybody's getting notified to come in, if you're watching on the replay, feel free to skip around. I expect our classes for the mystery quilt will be an hour, maybe a little less, with some just random chatting at the end of the class, okay? So if you're watching on the replay, you have the luxury of skipping around, right? Hi, everybody. And I know many of you are participating in the mystery quilt, but you're just watching, and then you're going to sew later. And that's absolutely fine. Hi, everybody. It's so great to see you. On the screen are instructions for how to get the pattern. And in the description box, there's also a link for the playlist. So all of these videos are going to be grouped together, so you can just go video, 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 all the way through the playlist as we go along. Excuse me, y'all. Just a little disclaimer as we get started. I had some dental work done Monday. I am still recovering. I'm a lot better. Still a little sore. Some of my words I say a little funny, but I am healing up, so that's good. And at the bottom of the screen, y'all, if y'all are in the creative crew on Facebook, we're going to have a sewing session dedicated to clue 1 of the mystery quilt. So if you want some sewing buddies while you sew your pieces for clue number 1, come hang out with us tonight on the creative crew, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. That Zoom, you can come hang out with us even if you're not doing the mystery quilt, but we're going to keep a focus on clue number 1, right? So bring your pieces, bring your fabric, bring your sewing machine, come hang out with us. Oh no, Christine, you had an unexpected wisdom tooth extraction. I feel your pain. I had 2 teeth removed Monday. But it's getting better. It's getting better. So let's switch over to the cutting mat. I'm going to show you clue number 1. We're not going to start sewing just yet, okay? Let me switch over to clue number 1. Clue number 1 is a 1-page PDF, right? In the first video of this series, if you don't have this yet, you can go to that video. It's in the playlist, and grab all the fabric requirements for this quilt. This quilt is going to measure 73 by 73 inches, right? Pretty good size quilt. And I do think it's beginner friendly, and I'm going to walk you through the steps. So if you are an extreme beginner to sewing and quilting, have confidence that you can do this, and I'm going to show you how. Okay? Delia says, how do we join in? You are joining in right now. The patterns are in the description box. You print them off, and you sew along with us. All the videos will be here on YouTube on Friday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. The clue will come out Friday morning. Okay, so Friday morning you can come, print off your PDF, and you're ready to get started. Quilting Girls at the dentist now. Having 2 teeth pulled. I was there Monday. I feel your pain. You'll be fine. I know it's nerve-wracking. So here's clue number 1, right? And the beauty of this, y'all, is I'm giving you 2 ways to do it. I'm giving you templates to cut out your pieces if you are piecing like patchwork. And if you prefer paper piecing, I've given you that too. So 2 different ways. I'm going to show you both of those methods today, and then you can choose which way you prefer to do this unit, this diamond and the square. One thing I do want to mention, and it says it here on the PDF, make sure you're printing actual size when you're printing your PDF. The outside of this box right here should measure 4.5 by 4.5 inches, right? 4.5 by 4.5. If that measurement is exact, then these templates for cutting out your pieces should be fine. Oh, for tonight, to join the Zoom tonight, you just have to be a member of the creative crew, and I will post a link at 8:30 tonight, Eastern Standard Time. You click on the link and you join in. Okay, so many of you have asked cutting instructions for all of these pieces. And I know many of you are extremely new to quilting. I know lots of you are very well seasoned and you might have already cut your pieces out altogether. But many of you have yards and yards of fabric waiting for this quilt and you are intimidated to cut into it. So what I did when I was cutting out my pieces yesterday is I took some pictures. And I'm going to share on the screen how I cut out my pieces. And I think that might be really helpful for you if you're scared to start cutting into those yards. Now, if you're going in a scrappy manner with this quilt, that's absolutely fine. And I hope you share pictures of it. But your cutting will look a lot different than what I'm going to show cutting from yardage. Okay? So let me pull up on the screen. And then the screen is going to look a little crazy for a minute as I pull this up. Okay? I just want to make sure that the screen shows before I continue. Hi, everybody. Hello. It's switching over now. Okay, perfect. It's up on the screen. Okay, I'm going to bring you through a slideshow progression of cutting out all of the pieces for clue number 1, okay, to make this diamond in the square. You'll see on the screen here that I have my A fabric. From your A fabric, okay, so my A fabric, you can see the yardage is just sort of bundled up to the right of the picture, right? I pulled out some inches of the A fabric and gave it a quick press, right? That full fabric is actually folded in half, right? So from the A fabric, for the 36 pieces, I cut 3 strips that were 3.5 inches wide. Okay, I just want to make sure that's right. Ta-da, ta-da. Yes. No, sorry, 3.25 inches wide. Not 3.5, 3.25 inches wide. I cut 3 strips right off of that yardage of A fabric. And then I rotated those strips and I cut again 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, each strip into 6 squares that were 3.25 inches wide. So I have all of these squares on my table, right? So each one you see is actually 2 because there's one underneath of each one of these squares. And that will give you your 36 pieces of A fabric that you need for the centerpiece of this unit. I just want to thank my moderators as we get started today. Thank you so much. So that's how I cut the centerpiece for the diamond in the square from the A fabric. Now we're going to switch over to the B fabric. I did the same thing. I pulled off a good amount, just unraveled the yardage of the B fabric. I gave that a quick press. It is folded in half. And from the B fabric, I cut 9 strips that were, I have it written down. Oh, hold on a second. Yeah, that's right. Okay. From the B fabric, I cut 9 strips that were 2.5 inches wide. So there's my 9 strips. And then I can put the B fabric yardage back. From these 9 strips, you can test it, right? You can cut out your B template and lay it on the strip. It should sit just like this on the strip. You can even take a marking pen and trace where you're going to cut these templates out. See that on the screen? You can go ahead and trace them just like this and start cutting that way. Or you can measure over 2.5 inches and pre-cut, and that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You'll get 8, actually 16, right? Because one's sitting underneath of each one of these squares. The fabric is folded. And you can cut them out that way. So 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares is what I did, instead of marking them with a pin. And then you can lay your paper template on each one of these 2.5 inch squares and cut off that section to the right. You'll see how I cut it there. But one thing I noticed was sometimes I would cut into my paper template this way. And if I kept doing it this way, then eventually that piece is going to get smaller and smaller because my paper template is going to get smaller and smaller. So what I did, you'll see I cut all that first strip, right? And I noticed I was cutting my paper template smaller and smaller, is I took the paper template and I taped it with just some Scotch tape to the top of my ruler. And then I could just line up the paper edge to my square and cut off that extra bit, right? So that is how I cut 144 of these B pieces that go in the corners of our diamond and a square. And I'm not going to lie, it took a few minutes to cut 144, but I wanted to share that with you. Now, as a part of clue number 1, down at the bottom of the page, you're going to see a yellow box, right? And that is part of clue 1, but we're saving these pieces for down the road. I wanted to cut these pieces off of the yardage before we start cutting too much into that yardage. I wanted to make sure that these pieces get cut and saved. So at the bottom in the yellow box, it says to cut 4 8.5 by 8.5 inch squares from the A fabric. So again, I laid out the A fabric. It is folded in half, and I cut one strip that's 8.5 inches wide, and then I rotated it and I cut that one strip 2 times. I got 2 8.5 inch blocks, and that gave me the 4 pieces that we need for clue number 1, just to set aside for further down the road. Okay? So I hope that wasn't too confusing. That's how I cut out my pieces. You might do something different, and you might need to revisit that, right? You might need to come back on the replay. All right. I feel like I can slow down a little bit. All right, so with those cutting instructions done, let me just tell you, because we're going to be doing this 2 different ways. If you are piecing this unit using your templates, right? Using these templates right here, that is how you cut your pieces. If you are paper piecing, I think that you should cut these pieces a little bit bigger because of the paper piecing process. So let me just show you what that looks like. So here is A and B, right? Oh, here we go. You cut those out directly on the line if you are piecing just normal, like patchwork piecing your quilt block. You cut those out directly on the line, and those are your templates. If you want to do the paper piecing portion, I really think that it will be helpful for you to cut these pieces a little bit bigger than the outside box. We will be trimming as we go along with paper piecing, and it gives you a little bit more wiggle room, and you don't have to be so exact. So if you're paper piecing, make these templates a little bit bigger, okay? And if you're paper piecing, you're going to cut this out directly on the line just like that. And you're going to fold on these 4 lines, right? Just go ahead and pre-fold your template and get it ready. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Linda said, will scan and cut instructions be added later? I want to try my machine since I usually mess up and the machine draws the 1/4 inch so I can follow straight, hopefully. Miss Linda, certain parts, certain clues of this quilt will be applique, and I will have SVGs that will be available for the applique portions of this quilt. I do feel like if you wanted your machine to cut out these pieces for you, that you could, since you have a scan and cut, you could put this on your mat and scan it and have your machine cut out your pieces for you. If you do that, just double check the accuracy of the size of your pieces, okay? I notice sometimes when I do that, and I just wanted to cut, not applique, but I just wanted to cut out my quilt pieces for patchwork, that sometimes they're a little bit on the smaller side. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the thickness of the line that it scans and creates a cut file from. That might have a lot to do with it. But if you scan this page and you're cutting from that, just double check the accuracy of the size. And the beauty of a scan and cut is you can change the size in the machine. So that's awesome. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do today for sewing is we're going to do, what are we going to do? We're going to do the piecing. So we're working with A and B pieces, right? And I've already pre-cut them, so they're ready to go. And let me just show you what I did, okay? I got me a gallon size Ziploc bag so I don't lose all of my pieces. I have my 4 8.5 by 8.5 pieces from the A fabric in here. I printed off a second copy of the PDF, and that's in here so I don't mix up what clue we're working on. I have my stack of A pieces and a whole bunch of the B pieces, right? So the first thing I want to do is go through and show you how to piece this unit, all right? And then we'll do the paper piecing next. All right, so for one unit, we're going to be using 1 A fabric, and we're going to be using 4 of these B pieces. So let's just lay them out like this for a second, right? We're doing a diamond and a square, like that. And let me just be really honest with you. I'm going to make 1 unit with you here for the class, but when I'm ready to start really sewing these units, I'm going to be chain piecing. And I think that I'm going to get through the 36 units much faster if it's just an assembly line sewing, right? You can do them one at a time like I'm doing here to show you, but I really feel like chain piecing, you're going to get through this much faster. I feel like I need to slow down. Peg said, so what size is the A square? A square, let me just measure it for you. 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 for the A square. The B pieces are a little bit different, right? You can cut them from a 2.5 inch square. So cut your 2.5 inch square, but you're not cutting that square from corner to corner. You notice there's a little bit extra. That allows for your seam allowance. So from that 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch square, if you measure over 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch and make yourself a line, that'll give you the exact template piece for that piece, okay? And that's how you can do that. All right, so the first thing that I like to do when I'm putting on the first two pieces, right? We're going to sew the first two pieces like that. Is I really find it helpful to find the center of this square, right? So to make these, I've just been folding this in half and creasing it with my fingernail, not giving it a hard line, but just a line that shows up pretty visible. Now I can see that in person, but I know you can't. So for video purposes, I'm going to take a fine line pen that erases. And I'm going to draw myself a little line, and you might not even see that. It's right in the center right there. That's going to help us line up these first two B pieces, right? Because we're going to turn this over, and the very tip of this triangle, we're going to line up with that middle line, just like that. And while we're at the sewing machine, we're going to line this one up the same way, like that. Okay, the little tips of the triangle are going to stick over that A piece just a little tad bit, and that's fine. So let's go over to the sewing machine. I am using a 1/4 inch seam allowance for my piecing today, and my unit came out exactly 4.5 by 4.5. If your piece comes out a little shy of 4.5 by 4.5 when you're done, you might want to use less than 1/4 inch, a scant 1/4 inch, okay? So let's go to the sewing machine. And we're bringing over these first two pieces. I don't know, you can just barely make out, I should have got a darker marker. You could just make out that little line, but the tip of that triangle is lined up with the very center. And then we're lining up the raw edges right here. And that's our first seam of the day. Now, you could flip that up like that, right? And get that out of the way just to line up your next piece. Again, that line is not really showing too much on screen, but I can see it. And I'm just lining up the point of that triangle, and we're going to sew that seam. So there's our first two seams for clue number 1, right? Let's come back over to the cutting mat. Now I gotta turn my iron on because I forgot. I was just so darn excited to get started. So let me put these off to the side. We're gonna move this right in here. Just like so. I have a whole bunch of stuff everywhere. There we go. Okay, we're going to give that a second to warm up. So right now our unit looks just like this. I have been pressing my seams towards the B pieces. You could press your seams open if you like. So I've just been flipping them right over like that. I give them a little crease. Just flipping it right over. Just being careful not to stretch these pieces out of shape, and then we can press. So once we've pressed those two seams, we are ready to add the next two. So the beauty of this is once you have these two on, you don't so much have to mark the center, because when you flip this over, it should just line up pretty accurately, just like that, right? You could, if you wanted to, and you found it helpful, let me cool this off because I don't want my marker to erase. You could fold it in half again, just like that, and give yourself a reference guide. Again, in person, I can see that fold, even though the fabric is much lighter. I can see it in person, and I'm not going through with a pen and marking each one of these as I go along, but I am giving myself that crease to line everything up. So we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to add these next two pieces. Terry said, so if you're chain piecing, do you do all the tops, then the bottoms and sides? Yep, so what I would do is I would grab a whole bunch of A pieces, right? And I would go through and just chain piece this first seam, right? Like 10 or more. You could do all of them at the same time. Once you get through all of those, you can separate them or leave them in the chain and flip them around, and then you're adding the next piece, right? Once you have both the first two pieces on, you can press it and get to this point. And then, in one continuous line, you'll add the next one, and then you're pressing all the units at the end. I do feel like that's the most effective and efficient way to do this unit. But you can certainly do them one at a time too if you're more comfortable that way. All right, so we're going to come back in, and I think you can see that I did it a little bit darker this time. We're going to line up with the triangle in the very point. If you want a chain piece, you might want to make one unit first before doing all your chains, just to check the accuracy of your 1/4 inch seam allowance, right? And once you know that that's good, then you could start just chain piecing away, right? I'm going to flip that up out of the way so we can line up this next one. All right, so we're going to go press these. I like to just get them over to the side, do a little creasing with my fingernail, not stretching, just a little bit of pressure, and then press. I like to use a tiny bit of steam. I know not everybody likes to put water in their iron. And that is the assembly of clue number 1 using the exact templates, right? Now you can square this up if you need to. You see my seams are a little bit off right here. You can take a 4.5 by 4.5 or really any size square ruler that is bigger than that and square this unit up if you need to. I would probably myself just leave that little sliver. See that little extra right there? As long as this unit measures 4.5 by 4.5, we're good. If it's coming up smaller or bigger, you're going to need to change your seam allowance so that this unit comes out exactly 4.5 by 4.5 because it's not finished. And it does play a vital role in the assembly of this quilt top, right? And so if your unit's not exactly 4.5 by 4.5, it's going to throw off a lot of other parts of your quilt. Sheila, I did not starch my fabrics. They seem to have a good amount of sizing in them when I got them. If they were very thin and flimsy, I would have starched them first. But the sizing that was in them, and I did not pre-wash my fabrics first, I just gave them a quick press and started cutting. Okay, so that is the piecing portion. Let's go over the paper piecing portion, right? So, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, and if you are choosing to go with the paper piecing portion, I would not myself, and I did it this way, so that's how I know to tell you to go a little bit bigger. If you're doing the paper piecing portion, I would not cut out my pieces exact. I would make my templates, if you wanted to pre-cut templates so that the process goes faster, I would cut my fabrics a little bit bigger, and that just gives you a little wiggle room to square up at the end, right? So as an example, let me just show you. That's done. Here is a finished B piece cut from the template on the PDF, right? That's ready to be pieced. The fabric that I'm going to use for the B piece for paper piecing is considerably larger. See that? That's going to give me a little bit more wiggle room when paper piecing. Here is my exact A piece for piecing, and here is what I've cut to use for paper piecing. It is bigger, okay? A lot of people love paper piecing because you can be so precise without having to worry about the exact 1/4 inch seam allowance, right? And so a lot of people find that they are much more accurate. So let me just move that out of the way. And I'm just trying to clear out some space here. I feel like I have so much going on. Okay. There we go. So you'll see I have a few things here, right? And if you've done paper piecing with me before, you know that my favorite way to do paper piecing is not actually sewing through the paper. So I can reuse this template until I've folded it so many times that it just falls apart, and then I can print another one, right? So I have my paper template that I've already folded on these 4 lines. I'm going to be using the add a 1/4 inch ruler. You don't have to have it, but it is really helpful for paper piecing. A seam roller would be helpful. I'll probably use my fingernails, but these are really helpful to have. And an Elmer's glue stick, right? And then of course some fabrics to do our piecing with. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add a couple of little dots of glue right in this A piece. Not a lot of glue, just little dabs of glue right in the A piece, not close to those lines. And the A fabric, I'm just going to center right over top. For video purposes, I'm going to hit this with a little bit of heat, although if you have a second to be patient, the paper will come off of this much easier if you don't use an iron. If you use an iron like I did, chances are the paper's going to stick to the back of the fabric a little bit, and you might tear your template. Most of the time I just kind of finger rub it and wait a minute before moving on, right? Renee said, do you need to purchase extra yardage if you choose to do paper piecing? No, you don't. And you're really only adding, let me just show you the template. Instead of cutting out on the line for regular piecing, I just give myself a little extra, right? And so you're really only adding a little bit. You're only adding just a little bit. Isn't the paper upside down? No, I like to do my paper piecing just like this. Ronnie said, so if you're paper piecing, could you cut your strips a bit wider to help with the yard? Yes. So you'd cut the same number of strips, right? You're just cutting your strips a little bit wider just to accommodate for that extra. All right, I think that's good. So the first thing we're going to do is you can pick either one, right? They're all the same. The first thing I'm going to do is flip this over and fold up that paper edge. And I'm going to take my ruler and we're going to cut off any of that A fabric that goes beyond 1/4 of an inch right there. So in my case, it was just a little sliver, right? And we're going to bring over our first B piece. And what we're going to do is we're going to line it up with the pretty side or the right side facing up. The right side of A is going to be facing down onto the right side of the B fabric. We're going to line up those raw edges just like that. Now you could throw a little clip in there. I'm just going to pick it up and pinch it with my fingers. You can line it back up at the sewing machine. We're going to take this over and we're going to sew right next to the paper edge. Not on the paper, but just right next to it. So there's our first seam for the paper piecing portion. And we're going to come back over here and we're going to flip over B. You can even add just a smidgen of glue just to keep that fabric down in place, right? And now you can use your seam roller. A lot of times I'll just use my fingernail, but we're just going to give that seam a good little press. You can use your iron. If you're using the glue, just know that your paper might stick even more. And there is the first piece for B, right? When I'm paper piecing, I kind of like to work around in a circle instead of working across from each other. I don't know that it matters any, but I tend to work in a circle when I'm doing paper piecing. So I'm just going to flip over the next B portion. And we're trimming off any of that extra that goes beyond the 1/4 inch. There we go. And then we're bringing over our next portion of B. And we're going to lay that right side down. And we're going to line up that raw edge. And we're bringing that over to the sewing machine. So on the back side, that's what it's going to look like as you go over to the sewing machine. With paper piecing, it really helps if you have your sort of everything right in arm's length, right? Because you're doing a lot of back and forth, back and forth. Just a little touch of glue right in the B section. And we're going to flip that fabric over. And I'm just going to do a little press right in that seam. And just rub that fabric so that it sticks to the paper a little bit. Connie said, so you don't have to match the center crease or match on point with this method, right? Yeah, the paper does all that work for you. Claudia said it should be on the back side of the fabric. I do paper piecing and you are doing it different than I do. The awesome thing about most quilting techniques is there's always more than one way to do it, right? Okay, so we're going to flip this over. And let's choose to do this section here. So I'm going to fold over B. And we are trimming away all of that extra. I should have brought my big cutter because this smaller one has a smaller blade. It doesn't quite want to go. There we go. So this is where we are, right? We're adding the next B piece. So I'm going to lay that right side up. And I just like to make sure that I'm centering this. This portion is what we're adding right there. I just want to make sure that I'm centering that right over the fabric so that when it opens up, it's going to cover all of the paper portion that it needs to, right? When you go to the sewing machine, this is what it's going to look like. So while this method might go a little bit slower, I do think you could chain piece doing the paper piecing. If you printed off maybe 5 of these templates, you could do chain piecing using the paper piecing method. And I think it would definitely speed up this whole process. I do think that. So we're going to open the paper back up. I'm adding a smidgen of glue in the B section. And I'm flipping that over and just doing a little crease in that seam. And rubbing the fabric in the glue. All right, so we have one more section, one more B section. So let's flip that over. Flip up the B section and we're trimming away all of that extra, right? We're leaving the 1/4 inch fabric for that seam. There we go. That worked better if I stood up. So this is our last piece. Again, I just kind of like center that right on there. And line up those raw edges. That's what it's going to look like underneath. And we're coming to the sewing machine. And back to the cutting mat. One last time, I'm going to add just a smidgen of glue in that B piece. And the reason I do that is because we still have one more thing to do in order to finish up this block, right? Let me just get the seam good and finger pressed. We still have to square this up, right? The edges look really wonkety. And this is not our finished piece. So if we flip this over, we are cutting away all the extra fabric that extends past our paper template. And that's one reason why you want to make sure when you cut this out and print it out that this measures 4.5 by 4.5, right? I did not bring a square ruler over. Let me grab one real quick. We are packing. And I've started moving all kinds of stuff. So we're going to trim off all the extra away from this. And I happen to have a Creative Grids ruler that's exactly 4.5 by 4.5, so that's helpful, right? Just line it up with the paper. And I'm going to stand up so I can be a little bit more accurate. I actually want to use this piece in my quilt and don't want to have to remake it. So I'm going to stand up while I trim. If you have a 4.5 by 4.5 square ruler, it would be so easy. You could just sort of rotate everything right around without having to move your ruler. That would be handy. All right, so we've gotten rid of all the extra fabric that we've added to these pieces, right, for the paper piecing method. And when we flip it over, it is perfectly pieced and perfectly 4.5 by 4.5. The main thing that's really important with this unit, y'all, is that you have the 1/4 inch from the tip of your little diamond to the edge of this unit, because that's going to be your seam allowance so that you don't lose your pretty little points when we sew this unit into something later down the road, right? And once you're done, because we haven't sewn through the fabric, or sewn through the paper, we should just be able to gently remove that paper from the back side and reuse this template over and over until it falls apart, right? And there is our unit perfectly pieced. Hazel said, "You're packing?" I am, Hazel. We're packing. There's big changes coming here at our house. So let me show you. This is the unit I pieced traditionally, right? And this is the paper piecing version. I do think this is so much more precise. But either way, whichever works best for you, I wanted to give you options with this unit so you can piece it traditionally or paper piece it. I'm just going to give this unit a quick little press. You'll be making 36 of these units all together. Yeah, like Gloria said, just print 6 and reuse them 6 times. Yes, and you could chain piece while doing paper piecing if you had 6 of them. And I think it would go much faster for you. And if you're like me and you're more precise with paper piecing, all of your units will be perfect and perfectly squared up when you're done, right? So here, let's see. So these are all the units I've done so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've made 8 of my 36. And I will be sewing this evening in the Zoom. So maybe I'll knock out a few more. But I thought as a good introductory into this mystery quilt, 36 units is a good number of units to do, right? That's a good amount of sewing, but it's not overwhelming, right? Gloria said the one on the right looks wonky. That's probably one that I pieced. I've done 2 of these with paper piecing, and the rest have been just piecing traditionally. My paper piecing is much more accurate than my traditional piecing. So the good news is when it's pieced together, that wonkiness will go away. So that's a good thing, right? Anitra said, I've got skills. I can even make paper piecing units wonky. I have a hard time believing that, Anitra. I really do. I've seen your quilts. What does the template block measure to? Flying Geese 50. This unit should finish at 4.5 by 4.5, right? And if you missed any of these previous measurements, it might just be easier to come back on the replay and to go through it, because I tell you. But if you're paper piecing, this unit should be 4.5 by 4.5 as well. Sylvia, yes, you could do this, Scrappy. And I am hoping that somebody does. I am hoping that somebody does, because I would love to see this quilt, Scrappy. And of course, the nature of this quilt is it's a mystery quilt, so you only know what one little section of this quilt looks like so far. If I were doing this, Scrappy, all of my A fabrics would be the same color, right? But they could be different fabrics. All of my B pieces would be the same color, but different fabrics, maybe even different tones. You know, like a lighter, medium, and dark. You could mix it up. But I would stick to like all of the center diamonds, the same color at least. Different fabrics. And all of the B pieces, the same color, different fabrics. I think it would be gorgeous. Rory just joined a few minutes ago and would like to know how to get started. Rory, every Friday we're coming live at 12 noon. You'll have to exit out of the live chat and then open the description box. You have your PDF for this clue is in there. The link for the playlist where all these videos are grouped together is in there. This quilt is free while we're doing it. Once we're done with all the clues, y'all, this pattern's going straight in the Etsy shop. So if you want to participate while it's free, print off your clues each week. And yeah, join us. If you can't make the lives, it's no big deal. You can watch it on the replay here on my channel. Thank you, Candy. Yeah, isn't that pretty? I really like these fabrics. I do. Oh, Sylvia, I'm so sorry to hear that. Amy said, I'm really going to like this. I made a practice square out of some scraps and finally using my 1/4-inch button on my sewing machine, and it came out perfect. Amy has a really good idea. Like if you want to just do one of these units to check your seam allowance to make sure it all comes out good, before cutting into the fabrics that you've designated for this quilt, pull out some scraps and make one unit and check it and see if your piecing is accurate. Check your seam allowance. What does the finished unit come to when it comes to size? Make adjustments and then use the fabric that you've designated for this quilt, right? I know most of us have a pretty good little stash of scraps laying around. Christine said, can the B piece be cut with the Creative Grids 2.5-inch ruler using the 45 mark that has the 1/4-inch seam allowance built in? Let me show you the, hold on one second. I think that Creative Grids has so many rulers, right? So I have two 2.5-inch rulers. One is 18.5 inches long. And it's 2.5 inches wide, right? And then I have this long mumbo jumbo one, right? Look how long this one is. This one's great for cutting off of yardage because it's long enough to do that. This one is 36.5 inches long. I just lined this bad boy. I gave myself a nice clean cut on the left side of my yardage, nice and straight. And then I was just able to cut my strips using this ruler, so it worked out fantastic. I'm not sure if that's the question you're asking me or not, but I used these to cut out my 2.5-inch strips. For the ones that were 3.5 or 3.25 inch, I used the same ruler, but I used the lines on my mat instead of the lines on the ruler. Darlene said, how many of these do we have to make? We're making 36 of these units right here. And they will go somewhere in this quilt. Each one of the clues we're doing from week to week, we're jumping around in this quilt. Okay? So I'm not going to tell you where this goes in the quilt, but you'll be using 36 of them. Susie said, could I just cut 2 3.25-inch squares and then cut diagonal one time for my bees? Try it with some scraps and test it and see. That's a little bit more math than what I can do on a live. I'm just being really honest with you. So what I would do, Susie, is just get you a scrap and cut it to 3.25 and then cut it on a diagonal and see if that works. Heather, I'm not sure. It depends on how things are going. We're going to start at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And however it's going, if there's people there with questions or want company while sewing and we're staying kind of productive and relevant to the clue, then we'll stay as long as, you know, as things are going. If things start to dwindle down a little bit, then, you know, 9:30, 10 o'clock maybe. You never know with a Creative Crew Zoom, right? You don't know. Sand of the Sun said, is there a cut list that says how much fabric you need for each piece? So, I think I have an answer to your question. As far as cutting for each one of the clues, I'm not telling you that. Each week, you're going to have cutting instructions for the pieces for that clue. But if you're asking me how much fabric you need for each one of the colors, then yes. In the first video in this playlist, you'll go to the description box. All of the A fabric, which is this for me, is a total of 2.25 yards. That's what you're going to be using for this quilt, right? The B is 1 7/8. It's going to be cut up a bunch of different ways. The C is 1 1/8. The D fabric is 2.5 yards, and the E fabric is 7/8 of a yard. And then you'll need 5 yards of fabric for the back. The binding for this quilt is built in. I forget which color I'm using for the binding. I think it's the D. How many weeks will this quilt be? So there's actually 15 clues. There's 15 clues, which means 15 classes. A little bit ago, I mentioned that I'm packing. And that's kind of, that wasn't something that was on the table when I designed and mentioned and planned this quilt. So let me just run that by you real quick. Since we're all done with the class portion, we are moving. We're going to sell our house. It's going to be listed in about a week. We've already packed. We have a pod in the driveway. We're decluttering and staging for showings and pictures. And we have a house that we're interested in. So, at some point in the 15 weeks, I imagine that we might be moving. And so as our adventure progresses and I know more information, we can go one of two ways. Here's the thing. I know many of y'all are working and you have a lot of other things to do. Some clues are going to go by really quickly for that week. Like some of you are going to have this done. Clue number 1 is going to be done by this afternoon. And you're going to go all week until clue number 2 comes out. Some of you have a lot more going on and you're working on other projects. So it's going to take you longer to do the clue, right? We can either, if we move in this 15-week time frame, I can either pre-record the clue for that week or we can take like a 2-week break, which would allow those who are a lot more busier to catch up, right, in that 2-week span. Or I can pre-record the clues. And I'm not sure which way we're going to go. Vicki said, can you explain what Zoom is for effort? Yes. So Zoom is a free app you can download on your phone, your tablet, your computer. And it's like a video conference, a video call. I see you, you see me. You can see me, but you can have your camera off, like if you don't want people to see. And we just all hang out together. The link will be posted on the Creative Crew Facebook page at 8:30 this evening. We're going to try to stay on topic about clue number 1. So even if you're not making the mystery quilt, or you plan on making it, but just not right now, you can come and hang out with us. And of course, we want to know how you're doing, but we're going to try to keep the focus on clue number 1. We are staying in Virginia, although the house we're really interested in is in a much more rural area, like farmland kind of area. Donna said, can I watch the replay immediately after your live? Yes. Yes. It should just be like 1 minute and you'll be able to come back. There will be a link for the Zoom. I learned my lesson about putting a Zoom link on my business Facebook page for the whole world to see. If you were a part of that class, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We had quite the entertainment. Creative Crew is a private, it's free. It's a free group. But I have more control over who's in that group, right? And so when I put a Zoom link up on Creative Crew, it's very much more controlled, and I will be putting the link there for you to join. Peggy said, I live in a rural area on 8 acres. It's great. Yes. My biggest concern, Peggy, is because I've so much transitioned our relationship here on YouTube doing the lives. And so the internet is something that's going to be really important for us. And something that we are researching a lot about because our internet situation is going to look a lot different. But we do have like 3 really great ideas for getting quality internet out there. So those are things we're working on. Oh, Angie has a good idea. If I do it pre-recorded for the 2 weeks we move, could I do it as a premiere so we can still chat with you? That's a really good idea. I like that idea. Wanda said, I bet you're already thinking of ideas for how to set up your... Wanda, I am. Let me just tell you. Okay, so I know a lot of y'all are like, well, Lisa, you just moved to that house. And we did. We just moved, 3.5 years ago. Can you believe we've been at this house for 3.5 years? So let me just tell you, we're all done with the clue. We're just chatting. one of the biggest things that has sparked the move. Okay, so I'm up here in my pretty studio, right? It is a gorgeous studio. It's a gorgeous house. But my studio is in a room above the garage. There is no access to the outside of the home from this room. So I have clients coming to drop off their t-shirts, their clothing, for quilts that I make for them. They have to come through my entire house and up 2 flights of stairs to come into my work. For a lot of people, for me, it's not an ordinary staircase to get upstairs in our house. If you've been to my house, you know. It's a lot of stairs for some people when they come do a consult for a quilt. And in my studio, I have really light, it's almost white carpet. It's very light. But there's also a step down section in my studio, and it is very dangerous. And I've actually had a couple of people just fall off the edge if they're just walking and not watching before I can tell them, watch out. I've had to start blocking that little section off so people don't fall while they are here doing a consult for a quilt, because people just see something, they start walking towards it, and they're not looking at that little step down. It's dangerous. I also would like to hire an employee. I had my daughter working for a little while, and that worked out really great, but they have so much going on. They're trying to sell a house. They have they have a lot of things going on with them. So I would like to hire an employee that could come to work with me that doesn't have to walk through my entire house to come to work, right? Which would mean if we are up visiting Harlan's family in another state, they could still come to work even if I'm not here, right? And I don't have to shut down big aspects of my business. Anytime we are away from home, they can come work while I'm gone, and they don't have to come through the entire house to do it. That's the main reason why we are moving. Y'all, I'm going to have to go through tonight, or not tonight because we're Zooming, maybe after the Zoom, and read everything I've missed because it goes by so fast. Darlene said, used to be 3,200 acres, but divided when Grandpa passed. The property we're looking at, okay, so is 46 acres. And so my studio, there would be there's a house for me on Harlan. There's another house for my parents, which is just a hop, skip, and jump right around the corner. And then there is a detached garage with an apartment over top. And the apartment is where my business would be, right? And so I could have clients just come straight to my studio. There would be a shorter flight of stairs to get inside. And for those who cannot come up the stairs, there's also a room downstairs that I could meet them in, right? But they wouldn't have to come through my entire house to come visit with me. And I think that's fantastic. I really do. Sheila, this one is in Gloucester. Allie creates it. Since we're just chatting, what does the flower applique behind you say? Flower applique behind me. Oh, that. Did I do a video on that? I don't think I did. I made a pattern for this and everything, and I never even published the pattern. Let me just scroll this. Well, I'll just hold it up. There you go. It's the same saying as one of our All the Things blocks has on it. Smile, tomorrow is a new day. But I made it into a little mini quilt so that I could put it on this stand that I got at the quilt show last year. Isn't that cute? It's so dang cute. It is nice up there, Sheila, but it is like night and day from our neighborhood to that area. But yeah, so God willing, and you never know, right? But if this is our next home, the apartment is double the studio size that I have now. And it's got great lighting for videos and a kitchen. That would be nice. And it's got a bathroom up there, so I wouldn't be like at our house that we lived at before. Harlan built me a little, a shed out in the backyard, but there was no running water, right? And so every time I'd have to go potty, I'd have to walk outside, walk through the backyard, go through the entire house to get to the closest bathroom. And so yeah. Thank y'all so much. Thank you. I do think that I could have in-person classes at this new place. Wouldn't that be something? You could come and stay at a motel that's not that far away, and then come over and come to my studio, and we could do in-person classes. Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah, a quilting retreat. Wouldn't that be awesome? There's lots of parking. That would be so much fun. Yeah, that would be awesome. Candy said, when you live where I do, you don't want to have to walk from one building to another for that. Yeah, right? Let's see. Linda has a great question. Is there any way I could make a twin size in this pattern? And I'm assuming you're talking about the Mystery Medallion quilt. That's a really great question, because the way the quilt is designed, it's a good size quilt, right? 73 by 73. And a lot of people are thinking, well, there's no way I could quilt that myself. You might want to think about tying this quilt or hand quilting this quilt. It is a good size, right? So several people have asked me, can I make this quilt smaller? If you want to make a version of this quilt, but you want to do it smaller, my suggestion is print off the clues as we're going along, because they're free right now. They're not going to be free as soon as we're done with this. Print them off, but wait, right? I do think you could adapt a version of this quilt smaller. I'm not doing the math for that, but you could take certain aspects and eliminate them from the pattern to reduce the size. And the reason I say to wait till the end, because I'm jumping all around. This might go in the middle of the quilt. It might go towards the outside. We don't know yet. I know. But I'm not indulging that information yet, right? Because it's a mystery. So at the end of this quilt series, you'll know where everything goes, and you can reduce and not make the portions of the quilt or the clues that go along the outside edge, and make the quilt smaller that way. So if you want to make a rendition of this quilt but smaller, just wait until we're done, and don't do the clues that go along the outside edge of this quilt, and that would make it smaller. There are bald eagles that nest right across the street from that house. So we we have one cat that particularly tries to bolt out the door. The other two want no part of being outside, and they don't try to go out. It's Ashley. We would have to be really careful with him that he doesn't just venture outside, because it would be dangerous for him. Jackie, I think you could do this quilt as you go, right? So with the first clue, this unit right here, you could layer a backing fabric, a piece of batting, and you could quilt. You could stitch the ditch, however you want to quilt this, right? As long as when you're done, you trim it to 4.5 by 4.5. This top piece needs to be 4.5 by 4.5. Whichever kind of method, we've learned that, right? We've done several quilt as you go projects, and each one we joined the blocks in a different way. No matter what, this top needs to be 4.5 by 4.5. But you could, yes. There you go, Mary Jo. Wait till the very end, and then do a rendition that's smaller. Janet, I have a Knolting Pro Series 24. And then I have the robotics on my machine, and I use Quiltmagine. And that's what drives it. Jean said, would you be near Chesterfield? My son lives in Chesterfield. I could stay with him and come take classes from you. I don't know where Chesterfield is. So if you look on a map, if you look up Gloucester, it's kind of near Matthews and Urbana, and I think it's Tappahannock or something like that. I don't know. I don't want to say too much because that house isn't even ours yet, right? But if everything goes well, we've actually found 2 houses that we really like. So, and that would suit all of our needs, right? A separate space for my parents where they'd have their own kitchen, their own living space, their own bedroom. They'd have some privacy. We'd have some privacy, with a studio with access to the outside. We've actually found 2 houses that fit those needs. Who knows where we're going to end up, but our favorite one is the one I've been talking about. Who knows? There might be another house that pops up tomorrow that would be even more fantastic. We just started this venture like a week and a half ago. We've already got a pod out in the driveway. Candy said medallions are generally square, aren't they, for the most part? Yes. This will be a square quilt with a feature in the very center that's going to be so pretty. I can't wait for you to start seeing that progress as we come along. But yeah, it'll have a feature in the very center and some borders going around the outside. All right, everybody. Well, if you've come in halfway through or you're just joining now, come back to the replay. I show you 2 different versions of making clue number 1, the diamond in the square. Both of the versions are on this 1-page PDF, and I'll walk you through that. I even show you a slideshow of how I cut the fabric from the yardage to get to this point. And I feel like it's a pretty effective way without a lot of waste. I have very little scraps of my yardage in the waste can right now, cutting the way that I show in the beginning of this video. If you're not doing anything, come hang out with us tonight. Creative Cruise, where the link will be. And if I don't see you there, and I don't see you anywhere else, I'll see you here next Friday, 12 o'clock noon, Eastern Standard Time for clue number 2. And that clue will be uploaded here on my channel Friday morning, a couple hours before we go live. So at least you have time to print it out so you can look at it while we're sewing. And if you have questions, it's a great time to come. I miss a lot of questions. I'm really sorry. Thank you so much to my moderators. You guys rock. And yes, I hope you have a fantastic week. Maybe next week I'll be sporting. Wow, I sound so funny when I say that. I got partials, y'all. I don't have them in yet, but I got them. They're so pretty. But my mouth is so sore that I can't wear them. But just in case you were wondering, because I talked about that the last time we were live, I did get them. I'm just not wearing them yet. I love you all. I'll see you next Friday. Bye, everybody. I have to go sew a quilt and pack. All right. I'm out of practice. There we go. Bye, everybody.